this is where I would say sustainability or your sustainability journey would start. So these are all my socials, my email address, but you can always reach me, my LinkedIn, my YouTube channel is called Eva the Vegan. I'll link it after the workshop in the chat. And I now have a Facebook page. It's Eva the Vegan or at Eva the Vegan. Can't quite remember if you're supposed to do the at on Facebook or not, but that's where you can find me. Okay, so first of all, what's in your bin? So like I said, going through your bin, and when I say going through your bin, I quite literally mean emptying your bin on the floor, getting down, looking at what's in it and all that good stuff is the first step to living more sustainably. You can't solve any problem without first acknowledging it. This is so, so important. So when you're looking through your bin, think about what areas of your home produce the most waste, what in particular you're throwing away. Is it coffee cups? Is it disposable razors? Is it packaging from food? And kind of focusing on that when it comes to your sustainability journey. And are you sorting your rubbish? So you need to also keep a lookout for if things are recyclable, why are they not in the recycling bin? Are you putting food waste in your landfill bin when you could be composting it? And also check with your local council on what is and isn't recyclable. Every council is different. I'll talk a bit more about that in a bit. And also F the trash jar. I feel like as soon as you type in zero waste on Google or low waste or plastic free living or whatever, you're going to come up with a jar full of someone's rubbish for the last 3 years, which is completely unreasonable and just unachievable because everyone's lives are different. Everyone has different levels of accessibility and we just can't, no one's perfect. And it's so hard to be completely zero waste in a world that encourages wastefulness. And I've said this before, but don't beat yourself up too much. It is 50-50. It's 50% you, 50% corporations and governments. It's a mixture. I truly believe that. Vote with your money, but also take a little bit of pressure off yourself. You can't save the world by yourself. So first I want to talk about recycling. This is the most popular thing to do when it comes to your waste. But I want to talk about recycling and fossil fuels and what I like to call the rise of convenience. So the link between recycling and the plastic industry, because the recycling we use today was actually partly invented by the fossil fuel industry. So fossil fuels were kind of like, look, there's cheaper, more durable, convenient, lighter packaging that you can use. And brands were like, oh, this is really interesting, but what do we do with it? And then fossil fuels were like, oh, you just get rid of it and councils will deal with it. Unfortunately, at the moment, a lot of companies, let's take Coca-Cola for example, I know they're doing a little bit of sustainability, but you don't send your bottles once you've drunk them to Coca-Cola. You send them to your local council and they deal with the problem. And that is not a sustainable way to deal with things because it means that those who are creating the waste in the first place are not then having to deal with it. And so they have no incentive to do something about it. So recycling is also a really good way to make consumers feel as though they're doing enough. And I don't want to bash people who recycle. It's great recycling. I recycle. Again, we can't be perfect, but recycling simply is not enough. Recycling is not a solution. So a few things, aluminium, which is mainly what your tins are made out of, can be recycled in a closed loop, which means that it doesn't need new material to be added. It requires a lot of energy for sure, but it can be recycled over and over again. Same with glass. These are really exciting things to watch. If you watch them on YouTube, watch videos of aluminium and glass, especially aluminium, because they make massive slabs and it's really, really cool. Plastic, however, especially PET plastic, which is polyethylene, can only be recycled 7 times. And every time you melt plastic down, it loses some of its shape, resilience. You're breaking down the polymers, and plastic is just a whole collection of polymers. So you need to add new plastic to the mix for it to keep its kind of physical properties. So plastic cannot be recycled in a closed loop like glass and aluminium, thereby is nowhere near sustainable. TerraPak, I put meh because TerraPak was kind of created to be more sustainable, but it hasn't quite worked out that way since a lot of councils do not have access to TerraPak recycling facilities. It's quite expensive to recycle TerraPak and to get like a TerraPak bin where you live. So just be careful with that, but I would definitely recommend if you do have TerraPak like juice cartons or even like crisp packets and stuff, just keep them. just fill them up in a bin, and then when you know that there's one near you or you find one, just take them. Don't worry about it. I'm lucky I've got one near me. I haven't used it yet, but like I'm quite excited. I'm like, oh, I had some crisps the other day. Let's do that. And remember, every council is different. You need to check your local council website to know what you can put in your recycling and what you can't. Educating yourself on what is recyclable and what isn't. And this is something that, and then cleaning your recycling. This is something not many people do. And it is really important. And you may wonder why it's so important, since it's only going to get melted down, and it's very hot when it gets melted down. You need to clean your recycling. Your recycling gets sorted because, you know, it's kind of like with glass bottles. When you recycle glass bottles, you don't just recycle all the glass bottles. You recycle the green ones together, the brown ones together, the clear ones together. It gets separated. So when your recycling goes off to the recycling facility, it gets separated and sorted. And if it's really dirty and hasn't been cleaned properly, it's contaminated, and it can have huge implications for recycling in that area of like the conveyor belt. If you've made a big mess, if you put a whole yogurt pot full of yogurt that's out of date and it gets all over loads of stuff, they're just going to force it to one side. They're pressured for time. There's a lot of rubbish going through there. It's just going to go into landfill. You need to clean your recycling. It takes 2 seconds and saves a lot of hassle for the people who have to look at your trash every single day. Just clean it. And recycling is not a solution. Lowering your waste is, which I'm assuming is why you're here, but still. So another part of, you know, going through your bin is understanding what's in your bin, understanding what materials there are, and understanding kind of what things are and what you can do with them. So we've got, these are the numbers that you'll find on plastic. You want to look at these numbers and you know what you can do with them. And also some things are best to buy in plastic, you know, not usually, but plastic can be a very useful material, hence why it was invented, especially in medicine. But it's good to know what plastic you have. And then if you have a choice of plastics, you can choose the more likely to be recycled option. So you've got number 1, which is polyethylene, which is picked up by most curbside. It's what you get in plastic bottles or plastic bags and kind of all that kind of stuff that you usually find. And then number 2 is high density polyethylene. Again, most curbside recycling will recycle these as well. And then you've got PVC, which is polyvinyl chloride. Probably didn't say that right. Polyvinyl chloride, that's it. Not usually recycled with curbside cycling. With curbside recycling, it's very hard to recycle. And then you got, you guessed it, low density polyethylene, which usually is curbside recycling. And that again is like your cleaning bottles, like bleach jugs, stuff like that, kind of thicker. I think it's a bit thicker anyway. And then you got PP, which is polypropylene, which can be recycled and is a really, really valuable thermoplastic. So plastic melts at quite a low temperature, not super low, obviously, but you know, if you put a thin bit of plastic in a cup of tea, it would probably morph if you put it in the microwave. It wouldn't last too good, but you know, so a thermoplastic is really, really valuable, and it costs quite a lot of money to make. And if something costs a lot of money to make, like stainless steel, they're going to recycle it. So choose expensive plastic. People love saving money. And then number 6 is polystyrene. Kind of gross. I have a hate with polystyrene. If you've ever like snapped polystyrene, like that noise is, I hate it. It's really hard to recycle, but it can be recycled. Not all recycling facilities can recycle it. So again, you need to check with your local recycling. And it's not usually curbside recycling, so you need to take it to a recycling centre or ship it off to a company that will recycle it. And then 7 is other, includes mixed plastics, recyclables, non-recyclables, and biodegradable plastics. So that will just depend. I would say avoid buying number 7, because if you don't know how to get rid of it. And a lot of biodegradable plastics, remember, are only industrially compostable. So next I want to talk about more reasons to avoid plastic. And a lot of the stuff I want to talk about is quite new science. It's not something that's been really heavily researched, so take it with a pinch of salt. I am not an expert, nor am I a scientist. But remember that the plastic industry is the fossil fuel industry. Plastic is made from oil makes plastic. Therefore, it is, you know, if you think about the morals that the fossil fuel industry has, then apply that to plastic industry, and there you go. There's some pretty disgusting things that some plastic manufacturers have done to the environment in the past and to people, because when we damage the environment, it tends to affect the poorest people and the most disadvantaged, because, well, that's the way the world works, sadly. So, and then I want to talk about BPA. So BPA is bisphenol A. So bisphenol A was first invented in the 20th century as a synthetic estrogen. So estrogen is a naturally occurring human hormone. It plays a really, really important role in the female reproductive system, in our menstrual cycles and all sorts of things, and in men as well. And men do have estrogen, sorry. But yeah, BPA was first invented as a synthetic estrogen. You probably heard of BPA most from these labels like BPA free on plastic water bottles and things like that, but a lot of things are not BPA free. So in the 1950s, they decided that BPA actually had really good manufacturing properties. So they started to use it to make packaging. And it is actually one of the most widely made chemicals in the world. There's so much BPA in the world, it's actually disgusting. So being a synthetic estrogen, it obviously has effects on your hormones for women, men, and children, but it also has links to increasing the kind of, I don't know how to say it. So it accelerates, it has links to accelerating the accumulation of fat within fat cells. It doesn't really create fat cells. We don't really create and get rid of fat cells. They just grow and get smaller kind of thing. They get bigger and get smaller depending on your body fat percentage. So estrogen has been linked to increase the accumulation of fat in fat cells in both children and adults, and has been linked to a decrease in sperm count. And if you didn't already know, the average sperm count of the average male has decreased about 50% since the 1950s, which is pretty closely linked to when we started making BPA. There are really, really strong links between a decrease in sperm count and male fertility and BPA, and it is absolutely terrifying. Also, microplastics. Microplastics are tiny. They aren't just shreds of fiber, they are tiny. You'll never see them. A guppy bag will never pick them up. They are tiny. If you wash a plastic water bottle, it releases microplastics. Like if you just run it under cold water or run it under your tap, microplastics are going to come off. They are everywhere. The scary thing about microplastics is the accumulation of it in the food chain. It's when it starts at the bottom and it builds its way up, and it accumulates as it gets consumed by, bigger and bigger animals and organisms, and then you eat it. So especially if you eat fish, it's quite scary how many microplastics are in fish. And although there isn't that much science around the effect that consuming microplastics has on human health, if you think about BPA, if any of that plastic is BPA, then that's a little bit terrifying, that being in your body, what kind of effect that is having. And then of course, plastic pollution. We all know about plastic pollution, and yeah, it's not looking good. So next, I want to talk about composting. We all love composting. So as many of you know, I live on the beach, well, not on the beach, but near the beach in Bournemouth, sunny Bournemouth. And I am an avid litter picker. And I pick up a lot of biodegradable coffee cups because people just seem to throw them on the beach, in woods, anywhere, thinking that they're magically going to biodegrade. No, biodegradable coffee cups can only be industrially composted. I cannot stress this enough. Don't put it in your recycling, don't put it in your landfill bin, don't put it in your home compost. Take it to your local industrial composting facility. And a lot of councils don't have it. So just think twice before buying a coffee cup. And also, what I found is I still use my reusable cup. I don't really see the problem. A lot of independent coffee shops will still take reusable cups despite the pandemic. All of my local coffee shops will, and they're even overjoyed. I mean, I got like vegan cinnamon buns in my own container. I've got my coffee in my own container, and I've done that so many times. Just ask. I know it's a difficult time, but just ask. They sanitize all the time. As long as it's clean on your end as well, it should be fine. Biodegradable packaging. Again, not usually compostable in your garden. And so many people just put biodegradable packaging in recycling. Just don't. If it's biodegradable, biodegrade it. Put it in your compost or put it in your kind of, I don't know what kind of bin it is. Is it green bin? To take to your local council to be industrially composted. Tea bags. So many people, I find this all the time when I'm at other people's houses and make me a cup of tea. Not so much anymore, don't really go anywhere. But they put the tea bags in their compost and they just use normal tea bags. And tea bags can be up to 40% plastic. That's not going to break down. And it just makes it more and more difficult for composting facilities because they have to go through and fish out. I see this quite a lot. People leaving their stickers on apples and stuff. And it just means that someone's got to fish it all out at the end of the compost kind of process. They've got to fish all the stickers out, fish all the tea bags out. Use biodegradable tea bags. They do tend to fall apart though, I found, or they've got silk in, or just don't use tea bags. Home composting, it's really important that you don't put meat or any animal products in your home compost or any cooked food. It does not break down like that. If you use a worm compost, you can do that, or an industrial compost, you can do that, but not in a home compost. You also need to layer your compost with brown and green waste. So sort of paper, dried leaves, layers of paper, dried leaves, food waste, coffee and tea. And you need to make sure it's kind of layered in a semi-logical way so that it can break down fully and properly. I didn't do that properly the first time I composted, and it took a really long time and it was really hard to get it healthy again. So industrial composting, if you're wondering, is just more controlled. It's hotter, it's quicker, it gets turned more. There's a lot more energy used in industrial composting. Since home composting, you basically just leave it and wait and stir it. Industrial composting is a bit more energy intensive. Worm composting is, also a great option. Worms you just put some worms, some food, and they'll eat it and turn it into compost for you. I don't really know where I sit on this, being a vegan. I had an open bottom compost in my garden, and so the worms would come up through the ground. So that I'm okay with, but like actually buying worms and putting them in there, I'm not really sure where I sit with that. But then again, it's personal preference. I'm sure there'll be loads of people in the chat talking about it. But don't just make compost. So many people compost and then they still buy bags of compost for their garden. If you make compost, use it. If not, donate it to your neighbour who's got a fruit and veg patch. Don't just make it. I watched my neighbours last year all summer as they had a compost bin, and then they bought tons and tons of plastic bags full of compost for all their vegetables. I was thinking to myself, you have a compost bin. Like, why don't you use your compost? I don't understand. Like, is it not ready? Then what's it been doing all year? If it's not ready, obviously not looking after it. Anyway, don't just make compost, but actually use it. So landfilling, don't really know if this is a word, but I've made it a word now. So it's worth remembering that oxygen is needed for decomposition. Landfills tend to be oxygen depleted. So when you put all this stuff in the landfill, there'll be bubbles of air in there, but they will soon be used up in the kind of breaking down of organic matter. And this is what makes I think it's pronounced leachate and landfill gases. So the gases which come off of the landfill are 40 to 60% methane, and the rest of it is usually carbon dioxide. These are collected by pumps because the landfill is covered. So they have pumps taking the gas out of the landfill, because otherwise it would probably, might not explode, but it would just be coming up through the ground. So they have pipes coming out of the landfill, which will carry the gases out, and same with the leachate. So leachate is basically like a liquid that is produced from the decomposition of things like organic matter. It's kind of like water with it, like moves through plastic and carries some of the chemicals. And if you were to not collect that leachate, that liquid that's gone through God knows how many things and collected God knows how many chemicals, it would have, just awful environment. It would just, I can't even imagine what it would do to the local environment. So that is also collected, but that's why it's so important that we hold our landfills to a really, really high standard, because when we ship a lot of our waste away, we are shipping them to countries that do not have the environmental regulations that we have here. And so they don't need to collect the landfill gas or the leachate. And it's just being leached into the natural environment and causing all sorts of problems, polluting waterways, polluting fields, so they can't grow any crops, and just having horrible, horrible effects on the environment and on human health. So incineration, this is very popular in Europe. I know a lot of countries in Europe absolutely love their incineration. Some even import waste to incinerate. I have mixed feelings about incineration. I don't know how everyone else feels, but it's basically burning rubbish, which is fine. I think it's a great thing, but it gets rid of it, but that has to go somewhere. It's worth remembering that energy is never gained nor lost, it's only transferred, and that gets turned into gas and ash. So you get loads of horrible gases which need to be captured, and you get ash. So the more effective the incinerator is, the less ash there will be, and then you have to bury that ash in landfill as you would if you didn't burn it first. The gases are captured, but then capturing gases like carbon capture, it's quite new technology. Burying captured gas and stuff is kind of like a mythical unicorn. So I went to a really interesting lecture with the IES, which is the Institute of Environmental Sciences. They do have a YouTube channel, and the IPCC were there, and they were talking, it's called the Burntwood Lecture, you can find it on YouTube. And they were talking about carbon capture as a solution for climate change and how it's more like a mythical unicorn. The science isn't there, we don't have time, we just need to do something else, basically. There's so many other things we can do. Why is everyone focusing on carbon capturing? It's a mythical unicorn. As much as I love unicorns, this is one unicorn that I'm a lot less excited about. So, trash or treasure? I'll show you my earrings afterwards, but I made these earrings from trash. So here are some ideas of what you can do with your rubbish instead of throwing it away. So it is spring, so I really hope you've all ordered your organic seeds and that you are starting to plant them, because it is fun growing food. Even if you just have a windowsill, lettuce can mature in 35 days from seeds. So definitely try and grow some lettuce or some herbs. You can use toilet rolls to grow seedlings. This is a really great way to grow seedlings instead of buying those plastic trays. Jars can be used for storage. You can donate jars to plastic-free shops so that when people go and they forget their jar, they can just take one out the box. Well, that's what my local package-free shop does anyway. You can recycle jars, of course, closed-loop recycling. Rubber bands. Rubber bands are really, really useful for things all around the house, tying things, hanging up things. Those twisty plastic things, I don't know what they're called, that you have on, I don't know, when you buy, I don't know, those twisty plastic things, if you know what I mean, you can use them to hang things and whatnot, even if you're growing a plant that's really tall. Say I'm going to be growing some broad beans. So then I'll use the twisty plastic things that are already left on my balcony when I moved in here to hold the broad beans up so that they don't topple over when they get too heavy. Plastic takeaway containers. I use these all the time for my stock storage. They're really great. They're so useful. Never have to buy a container. Punnets, like strawberry and raspberry punnets, they're really, really great as plant pots as well, and just really great for storing things. I store all my jar lids. If anyone's like me, they have an excessive amount of jar lids. I keep them all in punnets. Tins, you can again use as plant pots. All of my seedlings are actually planted in tins. I just put some kind of tissue paper at the bottom, some old paper that we got from parcels at the bottom, so it wasn't too deep for the seedlings to grow. That's a really great thing. And for storage, yeah, I love stabbing holes in tins. I even use it on my draining board to put all my cutlery in, because I didn't want to go out and buy a thingy that your cutlery dries in when you've washed up. Reuse bubble wrap. I remember, like, as a kid, always popping the bubble wrap, and now I kind of hate myself for it a little bit. You're like, why would you do that? You can reuse it. Yeah, bubble wrap's a really great thing to reuse, especially at the moment when we can't see friends and family. If you want to post something to your friends and family and it's a bit more fragile, then definitely use bubble wrap. Or even if you're just selling something online, it's really useful. I always keep everything I get through the post, everything. Air bubbles. Oh, I did make a Christmas video on my YouTube, and everyone thought it was quite strange, but those kind of air bubbles you get in parcels, I tie them into a bow and I use them on my Christmas tree, because they're like this clear plastic. when you have the lights on your Christmas tree, they kind of like shine, they catch the light, they look really pretty. And I use them to decorate my gifts as well. And everyone thinks they look like dog poo bags. They're not, they're air bubbles. And then I really wanted to give you some solutions to all of these problems, and just to kind of round up everything I've talked about over the last 8 weeks. So the first solution is just to reduce your waste. Again, I know we all have limitations, disabilities, accessibility, or literally everything. You know, no one's perfect. I don't want you to put too much pressure on yourself. I also want you to push yourself so that you can become the best version of yourself that you can be. I think it's really important to look at ourselves very objectively and improve ourselves while also being kind to ourselves. Boycott companies that don't align with your values. So many companies don't align with my values. So if your vegan spread is from Unilever, perhaps don't buy that one because it doesn't align with your values. Just kind of try and link your values to your consumption and make it reflect how you really feel, because that way you are voting with your money quite literally. Get active and advocate for change. I know we can't at the moment take to the internet. The internet's an amazing place. Remember, in the UK, we have the right to protest. And I just really want to emphasize that having the right to protest is a real privilege. We don't have the right to freedom of speech in the UK. A lot of people think we do. We don't. But we do have the right to protest. And if you think about, in some countries, women can't even own a car. They can't even go to school. They, you know, in so many places in the world, people don't have a voice. And it always baffles me how little, like when I look at a crowd of people, how most people have never been to protest. You were so privileged. I cannot even, you're so privileged to have the ability to voice your opinion in the streets. And I really think you should use it. If not for yourself, for the people who don't have that, who don't have the ability to do that themselves, who don't have those rights. You need to use it because it is there for you to use, and it is only fair that you use it. So also working towards a circular economy is a solution. Our economy right now is very linear. Our consumption is very linear, not in the accelerating kind of linear way, in the like flat line linear way. No, it can often sound that way. Intersectional environmentalism. I think this is really important to realise that environmentalism is intersectional. I think we've covered quite a few things here. Period poverty, fast fashion, how fast fashion is linked to environmental degradation, as well as being linked to sexism, racism. Intersectional environmentalism is the only way. You cannot fight oppression with oppression. We must realise that like environmentalism interlinks with sexism, racism, you know, classism. It intersects with all these different oppressive systems, and that all needs to be tackled at once rather than focusing on just the planet, because it affects everyone differently. And like I've said before, the people who are most affected by climate change are the people who A, have not contributed as much to it, B, do not consume that stuff, and C, tend to be people of colour and who are poorer, and who tend to be women as well. So it is really important that we realise that intersectional environmentalism is the kind of only way forward kind of thing. And reconnect to yourself and the planet. What I found most empowering for myself is, I always hate it when lockdown lifts and everyone's queuing outside all the fast fashion stores in town, and I can't cope. And I'll be on my way to the beach to spend time in nature. Go outside, spend a few hours outside, really look. Don't look at your phone, don't take pictures, really just be with nature, smell it, look at it, feel it with your bare feet. When you're more connected to the earth, you have more appreciation for it, and you are much more likely to want to protect it and look after it if you are connected to it. And realize that you yourself are part of the earth. You are an animal, you are a part of the planet as much as any flower, any animal. You've just drifted away a little bit. Coming back to yourself and coming back to realizing that you are part of this planet as well is so important in this fight. Now I've got two quotes for you. The one I'm holding in this placard at an Animal Rebellion event, kind of in the middle of lockdowns, which says, "Only when the last tree has died the last river has been poisoned and the last fish has been caught, will we realise we cannot eat money? And I think that's super powerful. And actually, I used that when I applied for university. Yeah, they should have guessed then that I was going to be a pain. And then I absolutely love this quote by the minimalists. If you don't know who they are, definitely check them out. They're all about minimalism, but minimalism is less consumption, which therefore is better for the planet and connecting to yourself a little bit more. And it just says, love people, use things, because the opposite never works. And I just, it's so true. It's so true. Just love people, okay? Love them. And finish off with another one of my favorite pictures of me blocking a bridge in London. So there you go. Thank you for listening. And now I'll answer your questions.